The quiet woman behind the wheel had no idea she was about to become the center of the most shocking revelation anyone on that base had ever witnessed. Captain Sarah Chun sat in the driver's seat of the old military transport bus, her weathered hands gripping the worn steering wheel as another group of recruits climbed aboard. To everyone around her, she was just another face in the crowd. Another driver. Another insignificant cog in the vast machinery of military bureaucracy. The young recruits barely glanced at her as they filed past, their conversations loud and boisterous, filled with the kind of bravado that only comes from those who have never truly been tested. One of them, a cocky private named Jackson, was particularly vocal. "Man, I can't wait to get to the real training," Jackson announced to his buddies, his voice carrying that particular brand of arrogance that made Sarah's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "All this basic stuff is for losers. I'm built for the elite units." His friend Marcus laughed. "Yeah, right. You couldn't even make it through Ranger School." "Please," Jackson scoffed, dropping into a seat directly behind Sarah. "Rangers are nothing. I'm talking about the real deal. Delta Force, SEAL Team 6. That's where legends are made." Sarah's knuckles whitened slightly on the steering wheel, but her expression remained neutral. She'd heard this conversation 1,000 times before. Young soldiers, drunk on movies and video games, convinced they understood what real warfare looked like. "You know what the problem with the military is today?" Jackson continued, apparently just getting started. "Too many people who don't belong. Like having bus drivers when we need warriors. I mean, look at her." He jerked his thumb towards Sarah. "What's she going to do if we get attacked? Ask the enemy to please wait while she calls for help." The other recruits laughed, and Sarah felt something cold and sharp twist in her chest. Not anger exactly. Something deeper. Something that carried the weight of 12 years of classified operations, of missions that officially never happened, of a life lived in shadows so deep that even her own family didn't know who she really was. She caught Jackson's eye in the rearview mirror. For just a moment, something flickered in her gaze. Something that made the young recruit shift uncomfortably in his seat, though he couldn't have said why. "You ever been in combat, son?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice carrying just enough edge to cut through the laughter. Jackson's bravado faltered for a split second, then returned with a vengeance. "Not yet, but I will be. Unlike some people who hide behind desk jobs and steering wheels." Sarah nodded slowly, turning her attention back to the road ahead. The irony was almost overwhelming. If this kid only knew that the woman he was mocking had more confirmed kills than most infantry battalions, that she'd flown helicopter extractions in places so classified they didn't appear on any map, that she'd earned her call sign Ghost not for her ability to disappear, but for her tendency to make enemy combatants vanish without a trace. But the real shock wasn't coming from Sarah's hidden past. It was walking across the tarmac at that very moment, heading directly toward their bus. Colonel Martinez was having the worst day of his career. The VIP demonstration that was supposed to showcase the base's elite capabilities had just suffered a catastrophic equipment failure. The primary assault helicopter, a $30 million Black Hawk, had developed what the mechanics diplomatically called a complex avionics malfunction. Translation: it was dead in the water, and there was no backup pilot qualified for the specific low-altitude precision flying the demonstration required. The foreign dignitaries were already seated in the viewing stands. The media was present, and in exactly 30 minutes, the base was supposed to demonstrate why American special operations remained the gold standard for the world. Martinez's radio crackled to life. "Sir, we've got a problem. Lieutenant Morrison just reported sick. Food poisoning. That leaves us with no qualified pilot for the backup bird." The colonel's face went pale. Morrison was their only other pilot certified for the advanced maneuvers required. Without him, the entire demonstration would have to be scrapped. It would be a humiliation felt all the way up to the Pentagon. "Sir," his aide pressed, "what are our options?" Martinez was about to respond when his gaze fell on the military transport bus parked nearby. For reasons he couldn't quite explain, his eyes lingered on the figure behind the wheel. There was something familiar about the way she sat, the precise angle of her shoulders, the alert stillness that spoke of constant readiness. And then it hit him like a physical blow. Sweet mother of, he breathed, pulling out his tablet and frantically scrolling through classified personnel files. It can't be. But there it was, buried deep in the records, accessible only to those with the highest security clearances. Captain Sarah Chun. Call sign Ghost. 12 years Delta Force. Specialized in aerial operations and close-quarter combat. 2 distinguished service crosses. A Silver Star. And a service record so classified that most of it was nothing but black bars on redacted documents. She was supposed to be deep undercover, assigned to the base's transportation division as part of an extended psychological evaluation following her last mission. A mission that, according to the fragments Martinez could read, had involved something called Operation Nightfall and had resulted in the successful extraction of 17 hostages from a terrorist compound in. The location was redacted. "Get me General Harrison on secure comms," Martinez ordered his aide, never taking his eyes off the bus. "Priority Alpha." The aide's eyebrows shot up. Priority Alpha communications were reserved for matters of national security. "Sir, may I ask?" "Just do it." While his aide scrambled to establish the connection, Martinez continued staring at the woman in the driver's seat. The pieces were falling into place. The way she held herself, the subtle scan pattern of her eyes as she monitored her surroundings. The fact that she'd parked the bus in a position that offered 3 different escape routes. Sarah Chun wasn't just any Delta Force operator. According to her file, she was a legend. The kind of operator other Special Forces soldiers whispered about in reverent tones. She'd pioneered several techniques that were now standard doctrine. She'd trained half the elite pilots currently serving in classified units. And these punk recruits were mocking her for being a bus driver. The secure connection crackled to life. "Colonel Martinez, this is General Harrison. You've got exactly 2 minutes of my time." "Sir, it's about Operation Nightfall." The silence on the other end was profound. When Harrison's voice returned, it was carefully controlled. "Colonel, that operation is classified beyond your clearance level." "Sir, I have the primary operator sitting 50 yards from me, driving a transport bus full of recruits who have no idea they're in the presence of a living legend." Another silence, longer this time. "Captain Chun." "Yes, sir. We've got a situation here. Our VIP demonstration is about to go sideways, and she might be our only solution. But, sir, breaking her cover is necessary," Harrison finished. "Colonel, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this conversation. Captain Chun isn't on psychological evaluation. She's on forced medical leave. Her last mission, let's just say she paid a price. The kind of price that would have broken lesser soldiers completely." Martinez felt his stomach drop. "Sir, she lost her entire team, Colonel. Saved the hostages, completed the mission, but her team didn't make it out. She's been questioning everything. Her purpose, her value, whether any of it matters. The brass thought maybe some time away from combat operations might help her find some perspective." The colonel's gaze shifted back to the bus, where he could see Sarah still engaged in quiet conversation with the recruits. "Sir, she's needed here. Then you'd better hope she's ready to remember who she is." Martinez closed the connection and began walking toward the bus, his mind racing. He was about to shatter the cover of one of the most decorated soldiers in American history. He was about to thrust her back into a world she'd been trying to escape. But he was also about to give those arrogant recruits the lesson of their lives. Back on the bus, Jackson was still holding court, oblivious to the approaching storm. "I mean, it's embarrassing, really," he was saying. "The military used to be about warriors. Now we got soccer moms driving buses and thinking they're serving their country." Sarah's hands had stopped moving on the steering wheel. She sat perfectly still, her breathing controlled, her expression unreadable. But something had changed in the atmosphere of the bus. The other recruits, the ones with any combat experience at all, had started to notice it. There was a tension in the air now, a sense that something significant was about to happen. "You know what real soldiers do?" Jackson continued, apparently immune to the shift in mood. "They fight. They bleed. They die for their brothers. They don't hide behind. Son, Sarah said quietly, and this time there was no mistaking the authority in her voice. You should stop talking now. Jackson laughed, but sounded forced. Or what? You gonna file a complaint with the motor pool supervisor? That was when Colonel Martinez reached the bus door. The colonel's boots on the metal steps rang out like gunshots in the suddenly silent vehicle. Every recruit turned to stare as the base commander himself climbed aboard, his face a mask of grim determination. Captain Chun, he said, and the formality of the address hit the bus like a physical blow. I need to speak with you. Now. Sarah's head turned slowly, and for the first time, the recruits got a full view of her face. What they saw there made several of them sit up straighter. This wasn't the face of a defeated bus driver. This was the face of a predator. Alert, dangerous, and completely in control. Is there a problem, Colonel? She asked, and her voice carried a quality that made Jackson's earlier bravado seem like the squeaking of a mouse. Martinez glanced around at the recruits, all of whom were now paying very close attention. We have a situation. The VIP demonstration. Our primary pilot is down, and Lieutenant Morrison just called in sick. I need someone who can handle the backup bird for low-altitude precision work. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Sir, I'm currently assigned to transportation duties. I don't think the brass would appreciate. Captain, Martinez interrupted, and there was something in his tone that made Jackson lean forward despite himself. General Harrison has personally authorized me to break your cover for this mission. The question is, are you ready? The silence that followed was deafening. Jackson's face had gone from cocky to confused to deeply worried in the space of 30 seconds. Cover? Mission? What the hell was going on? Sarah looked down at her hands, still gripping the steering wheel. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. How long has it been since I flew combat missions, Colonel? According to your file, for months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. She nodded slowly. And you think I'm still capable? Martinez leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Captain, you're Delta Force. You don't lose that because of one bad mission. You don't lose that because you're human enough to grieve for your team. You are one of the finest pilots and operators this country has ever produced. The question isn't whether you're capable. The question is whether you're ready to show these young soldiers what a real warrior looks like. That was the moment everything changed. Sarah's hands released the steering wheel, and when she turned to face the bus full of recruits, she was no longer a bus driver. She was a weapon, forged in combat and tempered by loss, but still sharp enough to cut through any challenge the world could throw at her. Everyone off the bus, she said quietly. Now. The recruits scrambled to comply. Jackson's face now pale as he began to understand that he'd spent the last 20 minutes mocking someone who could probably kill him with her bare hands before he'd even realized he was in danger. As they filed out, Sarah stood and began walking toward the front of the bus. With each step, her posture changed. The slight stoop of someone trying to remain invisible straightened into the perfect bearing of a professional soldier. The loose, civilian clothing seemed to transform into something more purposeful. Colonel Martinez fell in a step beside her. The bird's a Black Hawk, configured for close-quarter support. The demonstration calls for a series of low-altitude passes, precision hovering, and a simulated extraction under fire. Sarah nodded, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. Crew, you'll have a co-pilot and 2 gunners. All good soldiers, but none of them have worked with Delta Force before. They'll learn. As they walked across the tarmac toward the waiting helicopter, Jackson found himself following at a distance. His earlier bravado completely evaporated. He'd heard the stories, of course. Every soldier had heard whispered tales of the elite units, the men and women who operated in the shadows, who did the jobs that officially didn't exist. But those had always seemed like myths, legends, stories told to inspire or intimidate, depending on the audience. Now, he was watching one of those legends prepare for action, and the reality was both more mundane and more terrifying than anything he'd imagined. She didn't look superhuman. She looked like an ordinary woman in her 30s, someone you might pass on the street without a second glance. But there was something in the way she moved, the way she carried herself, that spoke of absolute confidence and devastating competence. The helicopter crew was waiting by their aircraft when Sarah and the colonel arrived. The co-pilot, a young lieutenant named Williams, looked puzzled. "Sir, I thought our pilot was sick?" "Lieutenant Williams," Martinez said formally. "Meet Captain Shun. She'll be your pilot for today's demonstration." Williams looked at Sarah, then back at the colonel, clearly confused. "Sir, I don't understand. Captain Shun isn't on our flight roster. I've never seen her before." "That's because Captain Shun has been flying missions you don't have clearance to know about," Martinez replied. "But for today's purposes, you need to understand that you are about to fly with one of the most experienced combat pilots in the United States military. I suggest you pay attention and learn something." Sarah was already conducting her pre-flight inspection, her hands moving over the aircraft with the kind of practice precision that comes from thousands of hours of flight time. She checked systems that Williams had never even thought to examine, tested connections that weren't part of the standard checklist, and ran her fingers along surfaces, feeling for subtle vibrations or irregularities that might indicate potential problems. "Ma'am," Williams said hesitantly, "the standard pre-flight procedure is designed for standard missions," Sarah interrupted without looking up from her inspection. "This isn't a standard mission. This is a demonstration in front of foreign dignitaries who would love nothing more than to go home and report that American capabilities aren't what they used to be. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen." The gunners, two sergeants named Rodriguez and Thompson, watched with growing appreciation as Sarah continued her inspection. They'd flown enough missions to recognize genuine expertise when they saw it. This woman knew aircraft the way a master craftsman knows his tools. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said respectfully, "what kind of flying experience do you have?" Sarah paused in her inspection and looked at him. For a moment, her professional mask slipped, and the gunner caught a glimpse of something deeper. "Pain, maybe, or loss. The kind that doesn't make it into official reports, Sergeant." 20 minutes later, the Black Hawk was airborne, and Williams was getting the education of his lifetime. Sarah flew like she was born to it, like the helicopter was an extension of her own body. She took the massive aircraft through maneuvers that pushed the limits of both machine and physics, holding hover patterns so precise they seemed to defy the laws of aerodynamics. "Jesus," Williams breathed into his headset as Sarah threaded the helicopter between two buildings with less than 10 feet of clearance on either side. "Where did you learn to fly like this?" "Places that don't exist," Sarah replied, her voice calm despite the complexity of what she was doing, against people who officially were never there. The demonstration was supposed to last 30 minutes. Sarah completed the entire sequence in 22 minutes, executing every required maneuver with a precision that left the watching dignitary speechless. But she wasn't finished. "Control, this is Ghost," she said into her radio, using her old call sign without thinking, requesting permission to demonstrate advanced tactical procedures. There was a pause. "Ghost, this is Control. Say again your call sign." Sarah's breath caught. She'd used her Delta Force identifier without conscious thought, slipping back into patterns that had been ingrained through years of combat operations. "Control, this is Captain Shun, requesting permission for additional demonstration." "Permission granted, Captain. You have the airspace." What followed was a masterclass in combat flying. Sarah took the Black Hawk through a series of maneuvers that most pilots didn't even know were possible. She demonstrated evasive techniques developed in the heat of actual combat, showed how to use terrain to mask approach patterns, and executed a simulated extraction that involved hovering the aircraft in positions that seemed to defy gravity itself. On the ground, Jackson and the other recruits watched in stunned silence. The woman they'd been mocking 20 minutes earlier was displaying skills that belonged in Hollywood movies, not reality. She was flying a massive military helicopter like it was a sports car, making it dance through the air with impossible grace. "That's impossible," one of the recruits whispered. "How is she doing that?" Jackson didn't answer. He was too busy processing the fact that he'd spent the morning insulting someone who could probably have killed everyone on the bus before calling for backup. The realization was both humbling and terrifying, but the real shock was still coming. As Sarah brought the helicopter in for landing, Colonel Martinez's radio crackled to life. It was General Harrison, calling on the secure channel. "Colonel, I've been watching the live feed of the demonstration. That was some of the finest flying I've seen in 30 years of service. How's Captain Chen holding up?" Martinez watched as Sarah shut down the aircraft with the same precise efficiency she'd shown throughout the flight. "Sir, I think she's exactly where she needs to be." "Good, because I just got word from Washington. They want her back." The colonel felt his blood run cold. "Sir, there's a situation developing, the kind that requires her specific skill set. I'm sending a briefing packet on secure channels now. She leaves tonight." As the helicopter's rotors wound down, Sarah climbed out of the cockpit and began walking toward the group of recruits who had watched the demonstration. Her face was unreadable, but something fundamental had changed. The defeated bus driver was gone, replaced by someone who moved with the confident stride of a professional warrior. Jackson took an involuntary step backward as she approached. Up close, he could see details he'd missed before. The way her eyes constantly scanned for threats. The positioning of her feet that would allow for instant movement in any direction. The subtle bulge under her left arm that suggested concealed carry. "Private Jackson," she said, and her voice carried an authority that made him snap to attention without thinking. "Why, yes, ma'am. You said earlier that real soldiers fight, bleed, and die for their brothers. You're absolutely right. But what you don't understand yet is that some of us also live for them. We carry their memories, their sacrifices, their trust that will continue the mission even when they can't." She paused, and for a moment, Jackson caught a glimpse of the pain she carried. The weight of command, the cost of decisions made in impossible circumstances, the burden of survival when others didn't make it home. "You want to be elite, son? Then understand this. It's not about the equipment or the training or the glory. It's about being willing to do whatever it takes to bring your people home, even when that means sacrificing everything you are for everything they could become." The young recruit nodded, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. "Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry for what I said on the bus." Sarah studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Apology accepted, Private. But remember this moment. Remember that heroes don't always look like what you expect. Sometimes they look like bus drivers or janitors or clerks. Sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates." Colonel Martinez approached, a tablet in his hand and a grim expression on his face. "Captain Chen, we need to talk privately." Sarah glanced at the tablet, and Martinez saw her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. Whatever was on that screen, she recognized it, and she didn't like it. "How long do I have?" she asked. "Wheels up at 2,200 hours. Full mission briefing en route." She nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement that spoke of decisions made and accepted. "I'll need to make some arrangements. Already taken care of. Your gear from storage has been retrieved and is being loaded now. Your team. I work alone now, Colonel. Not anymore. Washington specifically requested that you select your own team from available special operations personnel. They want you to have the best." For the first time since the demonstration began, Sarah smiled. It wasn't a happy expression. It was the smile of a predator who'd just been told the hunt was back on. "Then I guess it's time to remind people why they used to call me Ghost." As she walked away to prepare for her mission, Jackson turned to his fellow recruits, all of whom had watched the entire exchange in stunned silence. "Did we just?" he began, then trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "Yeah," another recruit replied. "We just made fun of a Delta Force legend. We told one of the most elite soldiers in the world that she wasn't worthy of wearing the uniform." Jackson felt his stomach drop. "We're so dead." But Marcus, the recruit who'd been more observant than the others, shook his head. "No, man. She could have destroyed us. Could have had us thrown off the base, or worse. But she didn't. She taught us something instead." "What's that?" "That being a warrior isn't about looking tough or talking big. It's about being ready to step up when everything's on the line. It's about carrying the weight so others don't have to." As evening fell, Sarah stood in the equipment bay among her classified gear, body armor scarred by combat, weapons worn by her grip, communications equipment that connected to channels that officially didn't exist. Each piece carried memories of fallen teammates. Colonel Martinez found her there, having second thoughts. Always, she replied. Anyone who doesn't shouldn't be doing this work. Sarah traced a patch on her armor, her former team's insignia. 4 months ago, I lost 6 of the best people I've ever known. They died because I made the right tactical call to save hostages. But it cost me my team. Her voice steadied as she continued. Today, watching those kids realize what they'd missed, I remembered why we do this. Not for glory, but so people can afford to be naive about what it takes to keep them safe. My team died, so 17 families could go home. Those families will never know their names, and that's exactly how it should be. So you'll take the mission? I will. But Colonel, those recruits, especially Jackson, they showed real potential today. When they're ready, recommend them for advanced training. At 2,200 hours, an unmarked aircraft lifted off, carrying Captain Sarah Chun toward a destination that would never appear in flight logs. In the barracks below, Jackson lay staring at the ceiling, replaying his morning mockery. The shame burned clean, clearing away illusions. Think we'll ever see her again? Marcus asked. I hope so, Jackson replied. And I hope we're worthy of it. Above them, the transport carried America's deadliest weapon back into the shadows. The woman mocked as a bus driver was once again Ghost, the Delta Force legend whose name was whispered with reverence in the Pentagon and fear in enemy compounds. The recruits never learned her full service record. Some things stay classified. But they never forgot the lesson. True warriors come in all forms, and the most dangerous ones are often the ones you never see coming. Years later, those recruits would tell this story to new soldiers, a cautionary tale about assumption and respect. For them, it was more than a story. It was proof that heroes walk among us daily, unrecognized, always ready to answer the call. Somewhere in the world, in places that don't exist on maps, Captain Sarah Chun continues operating under call sign Ghost, still bringing people home, still paying the price others don't have to, still proving the most important battles are fought by those who never receive recognition. The bus sits empty in the motor pool, waiting for its next driver. But the recruits who rode it that day learned you never know who might be behind the wheel or what incredible story might be hidden behind an ordinary face. Because sometimes the person you least expect to be a hero is exactly the person who will save your life.